Welcome one and all back in to another edition of The Future is Female. Gabrielle Ducharme, joined here as always by my legendary co-host Nicole Pinter. Nicole, how you doing on this fine Wednesday night?
Yeah, recording a little earlier in the week, but you know what? All things considered, pretty good, pretty tired, but here to talk about a lot of sports because this was March.
Right. You mentioned it. A lot of what we're going to highlight happened in the month of March, of course. So let's get right into it. Starting off, of course, with March Madness on the women's side. Arizona loses to Stanford in the NCAA National Championship game 54 to 53. Nicole, what were your thoughts as you were watching this game unfold?
What a game. I mean, on the low scoring end, all things considered, but many people were probably nervously sweating throughout the entire thing. I would have to have guessed. Um, but kind of was pulling for Arizona personally. I know, we're Sun Devils, we're not supposed to do that, but I was really pulling for them in this one. And they were so close. Oh my gosh. Well, and here's the thing too. They forced 21 turnovers off of Stanford. 21. And they really had a hard time taking advantage of any of them. And I give that credit to Stanford, honestly. Um, they proved they were the number one overall team, and credit to Arizona too, because a lot of people really didn't think they'd get this far.
Right. I remember telling people, like some of my peers, like I think Arizona's just going to get blasted because they're coming off, obviously they're coming off a field that was extremely competitive. They came off beating UConn, obviously, but I thought basically the whole season that Stanford was the best team in the nation, and it really wasn't close between Stanford and UConn. So I thought Arizona was going to get blasted, not because I wanted them to lose, but just because like I recognized where a program like Arizona was versus a program like Stanford. But then somebody very not so calmly reminded me that the last time Tara Vanderveer won a national title was in 2000, or it was in 1992. The last time she was in the Final Four was in 2010. Every single one of her players on her team, like the oldest player on her team is Anna Wilson. Anna Wilson's like 22 right now. She was in seventh grade the last time Tara Vanderveer made it to the Final Four. So they essentially were telling me, like, there's no advantage here, Gabrielle. You realize that, right? Like, the only advantage that Vanderveer has is that she's been there before. Nobody else on her team has been there before, but she has. So, thus, the difference between Vanderveer and Adia Barnes is just that, like, Vanderveer's been coaching for 35 years, Barnes has been coaching for, like, 5 years. Like, that's it. Their players don't have any advantages against one another other than, like, the fact that one of the coaches has been coaching for longer. When that person reminded me of it, I was like, oh, yeah, so maybe this game's going to be a lot closer than I initially predicted. And wow, was I horribly wrong, because my heart was skipping beats during that last possession. Nicole, what were your thoughts when you saw that Haley Jones was MVP of the Final Four?
Well deserved, obviously. The entire Stanford team, but Haley Jones was this. I would argue the standout, obviously the standout all season, and especially in this run. And they won the last two games by like 2 points total,
Yeah.
1 point in each game, and a lot of that, a lot of that was Haley Jones. So well deserved.
The funny part was, like, after the game, Haley Jones was all excited during her interview, and then they interviewed Tara Vanderveer, and Tara is still finding ways to poke holes in her team's play. Like, she's basically playing, we played like absolute you know what, but we still won. We probably didn't deserve to win, but we still won, even though we played like you know what. Leave it to Tara Vanderveer, of course, during her final game of the season with this particular team to still get on them about, loose balls, about offensive rebounding, turning over the basketball, all of the little things that make really good coaches tick. So I mean, I guess credit to Haley Jones for stepping up when her team needed her the most. She's only a sophomore right now, so she is coming back. And credit to Arizona for literally coming within one game-winning shot in the hands of their superstar senior to possibly win the national title. One more made shot, and they would have been national champions. The entire state of Arizona, I think, was honestly rooting for the Wildcats. I like whether you were a Sun Devil, whether you're a Lumberjack, it doesn't matter. Whether you're a Wildcat, by the time you get to the Final Four, it really doesn't matter, especially considering the other schools in the state that are Division I didn't even make the NCAA tournament. So, credit to Adia Barnes as well. You're in your 5th season and you're making it to the Final Four with like a ragtag group, as many people would have called it, a group that everybody counted out, nobody expected them to get to this point. So the fact that they were at this point, I mean, Nicole, what do you think is going to be the future for Arizona basketball?
I think it's really bright, especially with Barnes there. I know McDonald is, as we'll talk about in a minute, declared for the WNBA draft, but I think the future of this Arizona team is incredibly bright, and I do expect them to be back here within the next year or two.
I do too, and I hate to make this comparison because I am a huge fan of Charlie Turner-Thorne. Charlie Turner-Thorne is in her 24th year of coaching. She just finished her 24th season at ASU. And she's been coaching as a head coach at the Division I level longer than that even. But Turner-Thorne has never, ever made it to the Final Four. Adia Barnes did that in her 5th season at Arizona. I don't want to put too much expectation on Arizona women's basketball next season, but it feels like next season, depending on how their recruits work out and how they bounce back from losing Ari McDonald, it feels like it's going to start being Final Four or bust for this program. They're going to start being talked about amongst the Notre Dames, Connecticut's, and Stanfords of this country. So that's going to be super exciting. Of course, we're going to have to wait about 6 months to see Arizona basketball back on the basketball court. We got an all Pac-12 national title game, which was also really awesome. Hashtag back the pack, specifically for women's in this scenario. But Arizona, of course, right after that national championship game ended, Ari McDonald had 48 hours to declare for the WNBA draft. That's exactly what she did. Nicole, how do you think she's going to fare at the next level?
I think really well, and I think she's a top 10 pick. She has been the clear game changer for the Wildcats, and she's incredible. And she almost had that last shot triple teamed, which is insane. Which, by the way, I'm kind of upset Arizona didn't use that last time out. They had the player. They had a lane open, which when you're triple teamed is incredibly hard to see, mind you. But
right.
God, and she still almost got that shot off. That's crazy. But yeah, I think I don't like you. I don't want to put like expectations on her or anything. But I think she could have a quick ascension in the WNBA.
Well, why wouldn't you put it in your best player's hands, right? In a moment like that, why wouldn't you give it to her? She's earned the right to put up that last shot. She probably got it closer than anybody else on her team ever could have. So you think about how they could have handled that final play, but you also think about if they even went just 18 of 20 from the free throw line, if they had hit those 2 other free throws in, the 8-minute mark of the second quarter, they also would have been national champions, right? So like you could go back and nitpick that final play, but I also always argue with people, you can go back and nitpick every other mistake they made in the basketball game. Not taking advantage on one turnover, not making an easy layup on another. You can nitpick that all you want, unfortunately, in the sport of basketball. And that's what is that's what's the most exciting part about it, and that's what is the most frustrating part about it, because having a perfect game, that's not a thing. You do not always have a perfect game when you most need to. So, of course, Ari McDonald, she's WNBA bound. The WNBA draft is in just over 1 week, actually. It's on April 15th on ESPN. Watch it. Tune in. The stars that you saw in March Madness, you're about to see them at the next level in what is the most dominant women's basketball league in the entire world, bar none. So tune in to the draft to see where players land, and continue tuning into them this summer as they take the league by storm. Ari McDonald is not the only one. She's probably the one that Nicole and I will be paying closest attention to, though. Moving over to the men's side, of course, Baylor dominates Gonzaga 86-70 to win the national title. Gonzaga's perfect season is over just like that in the blink of about 2 hours. Nicole, your reaction watching the men's game, unlike the women's?
That was impressive. I mean, wow, from Baylor. There was defensively, like, don't get it twisted. Gonzaga was one of the best offensive teams for the whole season, and maybe in a long time. Not too long, but that was one guy. Timmy would get the ball, and there'd be like three guys like on him immediately. Even when Gonzaga looked like they went on a run, maybe they got a few stops. Baylor would just start hitting shots again. Shots would start falling again, and it was just, I know I'm in layman's terms, but it was really impressive, and Baylor deserved it. And especially, I do want to give a lot of credit to Scott Drew, of course, as well. I mean, what that Baylor athletics in general, but the basketball team when he took over, gosh, 18 years ago now, which is crazy, um, and turned the program around. Like this was unthinkable for them to win a title. So a lot of credit to him and that team. Well deserved.
And speaking of greatness, was this still one of the best Gonzaga? Was this Gonzaga basketball team still one of the greatest of all time, or was Baylor is Baylor now considered one of the greatest of all time because they took down a team that was undefeated?
I was gonna say this if Gonzaga won anyways. Ask me in 2 years because this always happens with recency bias, right? It's always, oh well, they're the best. They played the best, and yes, they played the best all season. I'm not coming out with any of those takes against Gonzaga. And Baylor was really impressive all year and could have gone undefeated. I do think the COVID pause might have hurt them a little bit,
Right.
but ask me in 2 years. Like I don't know. They were great. They were both really great teams, but are any of them beating the Villanova teams from a few years ago? I honestly don't know. So ask me in 2 years. Let me think about it.
Are they going to beat the Anthony Davis University of Kentucky Wildcats that won like the national title that had like 5 players go to the NBA in 2012? I don't know. I don't know.
Are they beating Memphis or Kansas from '08? Like I asking the questions. I'm not sure. I can't answer that in full confidence.
That's the issue that I take with this conversation because I feel like every year at the end of March Madness, we have this conversation about the national champions, that they're one of the greatest teams of all time. And every single year, there are great arguments on both sides. Unfortunately, I think the real question is not, is this one of the greatest teams of all time, but can the two teams maintain this dominance after this year, going into 2021, 2022, 2023? If they can maintain it, then you're talking more so about who the greater programs are in college basketball. So definitely, I don't think, obviously neither team was a Cinderella story, unlike other teams that made it to the Final Four, but whether or not they're one of the dominant programs in college basketball, only time will kind of tell. Moving on, of course, from college basketball on court March Madness, Sean Miller was just ousted as Arizona's head basketball coach today. He was fired very, very recently, like within just a few hours of us recording this episode. Nicole, what was your first reaction when you saw that news?
Took him this long. He's at the head. Him and Will Wade are at the head of, the second biggest NCAA scandal going on right now. And it's just kind of funny that they just went head first into, like we're keeping him, even though they know what he's been doing and they still can't make a Final Four. I don't know. That's just kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just took long enough.
It's still a Power 5 school. It's still in the Pac-12, and we saw what the Pac-12 did during the NCAA tournament on the men's side. Yeah, I'm going to kind of agree with you. It took them this long. Like, you knew you weren't going to the big dance. You knew that all of that work that Sean Miller did to cheat and, hand out $100,000 checks like they were candy, obviously it didn't help, right? Like, it really didn't help the program. You lost recruits. You lost opportunities to win national titles, to win Pac-12 titles. So, like, was it all worth it? Clearly it wasn't. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Arizona men's basketball. We'll keep an eye on it in, the coming weeks. Of course, transitioning a little bit from Sean Miller, NCAA March Madness to the NBA. This is something we haven't really touched on very much in the last few weeks. LeBron James and Anthony Davis are still out for the Los Angeles Lakers. They've both been injured now for about the last 6 weeks, and it looks like they're both going to be out for quite a bit longer. Lakers are kind of struggling right now without them, so hopefully they do get back on track. People like Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder have really stepped up and tried to become kind of that heart and soul of the team. There's no replacing Anthony Davis and LeBron James, though. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens there. And then on the other side, MVP candidates, James Harden is really, really good at basketball and still really, really good at basketball. And even though he's not a Houston Rocket anymore, he's now flourishing and thriving as a Brooklyn Net. I thought that the Brooklyn experiment was going to be a total disaster, and wow, I was horrendously wrong. Whether or not he's actually an MVP candidate kind of remains to be seen. Unfortunately, I think LeBron James is kind of out of that conversation right now because he has been injured for so long. You know, not only does MVP candidacy rely on how good you are on the court, but it also relies on longevity and being able to last through games. And when you're 35 or 36 years old, like you are, like LeBron James is, you're going to be banged up a little bit more. So that's kind of the latest right now with the NBA. Stay tuned for more on that in the coming weeks. We're going to transition, though, over to some NFL talk. Nicole, we're going to bring you back into the conversation here. Sam Darnold is no longer a New York Jet. Break it down for us. What's going on?
Good for Sam Darnold. He was traded to the Carolina Panthers for a 2021 sixth-round pick, this year and the next year 2022 second and fourth round picks. This is kind of a gamble for the Panthers. This is a little bit of a gamble. Clearly Bridgewater is on the move somewhere. That remains to be seen. But honestly, congrats for Sam Darnold, because I do think there is still some room for potential there. I don't like the idea of giving up on him yet. I didn't like him coming out of the draft. I did not hide that. I still am not a fan of him, but I do think that potential is there, especially outside of New York Jets. I know Robert Saleh is a really well-liked coach and will probably do a great job. I wish him nothing but the best, but it's still the New York Jets at the end of the day. And getting out of New York, getting out of New Jersey, and going to Joe Brady and Matt Rule, like, what a breath of fresh air for him. You know, this is because he's a guy in his third year where we still really don't know what to think about him. There's some flashes. He's athletic, but is he a franchise quarterback? Like that still is being questioned 3 years later. So this is really good for him. Probably the best pickup the Jets could get after Wentz wasn't even traded for a first round pick or anything like that. Not that he should have been, but just kind of setting the standard. So really interesting. Good for Darnold. Obviously opens up the way for Zach Wilson, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Gabby, the season. So actually, first, what do you think of this trade?
I've never been a fan of USC quarterbacks because I'm just not a big fan of USC. Matt Barkley was a bust. Mark Sanchez was a bust. Sam Darnold is busting hard right now. If it's the team, good for him for getting the heck out of Dodge. If it is him and he's overrated, oh, good luck, Carolina. I don't know exactly which way it goes at this point because this is the same team that had the butt fumble, and this is the same team that's missed the postseason for like 10 years and has had horrible offensive lines for like 12 years. I don't know how that's possible, but it is. So like I don't know like exactly what to think of it at this point. I think Darnold still has a chance as long as he's in a system that works for him, and so I think because of that, you know, they're gonna have a legit chance, but I'm the buck is still kind of out for me on Sam Darnold. I'm not fully convinced that this trade is like the thing that's gonna save his career. I think if you're a franchise QB, you find a way to make the franchise work, even if it is, you know, even if it is the New York Jets. So those are my thoughts on it initially.
All right, moving on. The NFL expanded the season to 17 games, reduced preseason games to 3. This is a move that comes with the ginormous TV deal that was signed last month, I guess. So this was kind of a long time coming ish with the not long time, but with the expansion of the playoffs and everything, this is kind of the road they've been going down. I some of my peers have said that this is sort of a stepping stone for 18 games. Gabby, what are your thoughts on the expansion of the season?
Other than money, why must we? I think the preseason's actually being shortened and the regular season's kind of being expanded pretty much. So as far as I understand, are they going to be playing more games or less games at this point?
Well, now you have me thinking. Well, but now the regular season is seven, 18 weeks with
Okay.
one bye, I believe.
Okay. So like the season, no matter
It's one
what.
more it's one more regular season game. So even if it's the same, it's starters aren't playing that last preseason game.
Right, right. So like the but so like it just brings up this bigger conversation of like why is that necessary for the athletes? Why is it necessary for them to put their bodies on the line for one more week just so you can make a couple more $1,000,000? Like when you're a billionaire, what is, a couple more million, right? But I guess when you're, greedy like that, it makes it difficult, right? I don't love the idea of the expansion. I don't think it's necessary. Um, Football already rules people's lives from September to January. Why are we extending it one more week? I don't know, but it's just going to make the leap that much harder from college to pro because there's going to be one more game, one more extended game, one more game extending that season that rookies are going to have to get used to. It only makes it that much harder for athletes to stay healthy and stay in shape. It makes it that much harder for people to be ready for the postseason. It gives people more. It's going to, I think, make more starters prone to sitting out in like that week 17 or whatever, like that 17th game. I think a lot of them are not going to want to play that last game, especially if they already have like the playoffs um, clinched and everything. You're not going to see Pat Mahomes playing in week 18 if the Chiefs, they sealed up home court or home field advantage in week 11. That's just not going to be necessary. I don't see the point of it. Other than that, it's going to make them a crap ton of money on the TV end. And Nicole, what were your thoughts when you saw it?
Well, I'm never going to complain about an extra week of football, but obviously, the whole NFL cares about concussions and player safety is obviously just not true, but what else is new? Um, yeah, it is unnecessary and players hate it and they have every right to hate it, if you ask me. So, I'll never complain about an extra week of football. You won't see me doing that. But as far as the players go, like they have every right to be mad, and I get why they're mad because and even on the less important end, teams are going to end like 9-8 and 10-7, and like that is just utterly disgusting to me. Like that is it's not an even number. I can't do that. That's that's going to be rough next season seeing that. But you know, more important how the players feel about this. The draft is less than a month away, real quick, to finish up here before Gabby's future fantasies. Lawrence and Wilson are likely to go first and second. That is almost all but set. Who after that? The 49ers traded up. Many saying Mac Jones, Justin Fields. I'll give you my thoughts like really quick. I'm not completely sold on Zach Wilson. We'll dive more into this later this month, which I guess in the next couple weeks, probably one of our last shows because we're coming up on that soon. But I'm not sold on Wilson. I'm not sold that Wilson is better than Justin Fields. I really like Justin Fields, but if Justin Fields falls to the Chicago Bears, then it was all worth it because I want him. I do not want Mac Jones because of Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. As far as the 49ers, I'm not huge on Mac Jones either, but I really like Mac Jones in San Francisco. Elsewhere, I'm not entirely sure. Mac Jones in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan could work. And I'd actually kind of be excited to see that. But that's my really quick thoughts on draft QBs. We'll go more into that in coming weeks.
Yeah, I have a comparison that I'll talk about next week that I heard on talk radio the other day, which was quite interesting about Mac Jones. but I'll get to that next week, of course. Nicole, just to kind of wrap up the show, I'm going to do my future fantasy real quick, which is going back to what's going on with Arizona basketball. Your men's program is kind of a mess right now. It's kind of a wreck. Your women's program is coming off being in the national title game. So invest in your women's program with everything you've got. Anything that you were going to invest in the men's program under Sean Miller, just put it towards the women's program for like the next 5 years and see what they can do. Like, genuinely put the women's program as the priority. Like, they're not like considered like second class anymore to your men's team. They just made the national title game, and Adia Barnes knows what she's doing. Adia is not messing around. She just beat Gina Oriema, and she almost beat Tara Vanderveer like almost at the buzzer. There are coaches in her conference that have coached their teams 3 times as long as she has, and she already made it to the Final Four. She knows what she's doing. And BT Dubs, she's like a 6-month-old at home. So she's like doing this in the throes of a global pandemic while she's like still like breastfeeding her baby. So please, for the love of all that is good, invest in Adia Barnes' program in the way that you would have invested in Sean Miller's program had they had this amount of success this early. Invest in it for recruitment, for resourcing, for trainers, for nutritionists, for games, for scheduling, sponsorship. Invest everything you have into it, because what do you have to lose at this point? Your men's program is clearly not winning a national title anytime soon. So whatever money you have, invested in the team that just lost the national championship by 1 shot. That's one future fantasy I have. And then the second one is everything that happened with the NCAA women's tournament this year with regard to the weight room and the inequities in the types of COVID-19 testing and the arguments of Title IX and what role it had in it. Let's not do this ever again. Let's just remember that Sedona Prince and Paige Beckers both have bigger social media followings than Jalen Suggs, like top 2 NBA pick Jalen Suggs on the men's side. They have significantly bigger social media followings. Paige Beckers has double what he has. Sedona Prince has the biggest following of any athlete across the board in NCAA athletics right now. So let's invest in that. Let's remember that next year so that we're not back where we were 4 weeks ago when the weight room went viral, when news came out about the kind of COVID testing the women's basketball players were getting. Let's not go backwards. NCAA, you have an opportunity right now to take like 5,000 steps forward. Let's not take 4 steps backwards. Of course, for Nicole Pinter and myself, Gabby Ducharme, that's all for us this week on The Future is Female. Until next time, we will see you all next week. Everybody, please stay safe, stay healthy, and go give your mom a hug this week for us, okay? Okay.